Little while back in the September Direct, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave was announced. And at the time, it went a little under the radar for me. There was just a lot of other big announcements that had my attention. But once that excitement settled down, I started thinking about my relationship with Fire Emblem and just the status of the franchise as a whole with the Nintendo community. Fire Emblem has had its ups and downs, and I know a bit about its history, though I still have a lot to learn. I know there were 6 whole games before it even came out in America, then a number of games that did come out in America but struggled financially, then Awakening was a huge success and kind of redefined Fire Emblem as a whole, then Three Houses came and did it all again, finally ending on the last new game of the series, Engage, which I know had a mixed reception overall, pleasing Fire Emblem fans who have been with the franchise since the beginning, but not really pleasing Fire Emblem fans who jumped on in the Awakening Three Houses era. And then you throw in the Smash community, the Too Many Fire Emblem Characters community, and the whole thing just gets really loud and really messy. For me, Fire Emblem has always had a subtle but impactful presence in my life. I am a part of the started in Awakening generation, moved on to Fates, and I have a lot of positive things to say about Fates, honestly. And then Three Houses, which I played a lot of times and really enjoyed. But that's really as far as it goes. There are other Fire Emblems that I've played for an hour, but as much as I enjoyed the games that I had played, I knew I had a long way to go to truly experience and take in the franchise as a whole. And I don't know, something about the cold welcome that Fortune's Weave got on the internet made me want to do my due diligence and play some Fire Emblem games. I knew that I wanted to play some older Fire Emblem games, ones that, actually punish you for mistakes. I have been a big baby and played on your units don't actually die mode all my life. So I wanted to graduate, play with a little bit more stakes, not go too crazy, mind you, but I really wanted to take the next step forward in enjoying Fire Emblem as much as I do a lot of the other big Nintendo franchises. And out of all of the games that I considered, the one that appealed to me easily the most was Fire Emblem, as it was called here in America. It's Fire Emblem 7 or Fire Emblem Blazing Sword. It's got a lot of names. Essentially, this was the first Fire Emblem game to release in America. So for a lot of people, a lot of fans, this was their first Fire Emblem game. And so I figure it holds a special place in a lot of fans' hearts, even if there are other games that might be higher quality or just deliver a better experience. But something about FE7 really was already giving me an emotional connection, and I really think that it starts with Lindis. Lyn is one of 3 main characters in Fire Emblem 7, and the host of what's called Lyn mode. Essentially, the first 10 chapters of this game are dedicated to tutorials, where you travel alongside Lyn and gather a few more units along the way, stepping in very slowly and very gradually into the gameplay loop, learning about the grid-based movement, learning about the weapon triangle effectiveness, learning about vulneraries, learning about promotions, just everything. And a lot of people don't like Lyn mode, I assume because for repeat playthroughs, it must be really annoying going through tutorials over and over again. But for a first impression, I actually really love it. There's such a personal connection with Lyn. You are essentially a character within the game. You are a traveling tactician. Lyn saves you from some bandits, and in return, you travel along with her, give her advice, and help her achieve her dreams. It's genuinely really sweet. I can see why this fan community in large has gotten so attached to Lindis. It's just really pleasant, which is wild, because people are dying. I considered playing on hard difficulty. Reading up on the game before jumping into it, I had heard that it was pretty easy, and I thought maybe I want to challenge myself a little bit. But it turns out I couldn't even access hard mode until beating normal mode once, so I think it worked out for me in the end. It meant that certain characters that I had grown attached to in the early Lin chapters, I could stick with. They didn't really get underpowered as the story went on. Oh, I mean, some did. But like the ones I really cared about, I was able to keep around. Because you recruit characters all game, you're going to end up with a really large army. And many units that do like the same thing, because yeah, if a unit dies, they're dead. The three main characters of the game can't die, you just get a game over. But anyone else, yeah, they're free game. So in much later chapters, you may find the game being like, hey, did you lose all your healers? Well, here's another healer. But by the end of the game, the units get like Invincible, Pent, and Harkin. Like these guys, they played the game for me. But you know, they only join at like the last couple chapters of the game, so for the most part, it is still an uphill battle. Once you get through the 10 Lin mode chapters, you then transition to the primary story of the game, where the main character torch gets passed from Lin to Eliwood. And yes, Eliwood, this is not Roy, even though they look quite similar. This is actually his father. And Eliwood's okay. That personal connection with Lin doesn't really exist here. He doesn't talk to us as frequently. You know, he wants to save his dad, and he cares a lot about Ninian, and Nils is also there. But you know, he's still cool. He works well enough as your typical, you know, Fire Emblem fantasy lord protagonist. And then there's Hector, the third main character. Hector, big man and smack thing with big axe. He is a punch in a suit of armor. He is a boulder that throws itself. He cares little for espionage and tactics. He just swings his massive weapon and kills everybody in 2 hits. He was a fun presence. I know that he is the main character in the hard mode that I couldn't play, so there might be more to his story that I didn't get here, but he was a fun and memorable third character. To shift from characters for a second, I want to talk about how the game looks. I really love the vibrant colors. It's simplistic, but it's bright and satisfying. I love the headshot talking sprites of all the units. They're all really well designed, and I find that even the characters that I didn't get to know at all, I feel like I got who they were just by looking at their headshot. A lot of the music tracks are really short, and because of the repetitive nature of a lot of these maps, you will be hearing them over and over. So it's a good thing that they're super catchy and never a bore to listen to. I honestly couldn't get enough of this whole package. All of the characters are great. I loved them like my children. I may have used the rewind feature on NSO once or twice. I only did it though because I care. I cared a lot about what was going on and the struggles of these characters. I was really invested, and when I finally finished, I was excited to try again in Hector Hard Mode. I haven't done so yet, but I know one day I will, and I'm really looking forward to taking on that challenge. But I ended up doing something else instead. I don't know what possessed me to do this, but after I had finished FE7 and the Fire Emblem itch had not yet been satiated, I wanted more. Once again, I had to decide what to play. I knew Path of Radiance was going to come to the GameCube NSO eventually, so I figure wait till then to give that a shot. Genealogy of the Holy War is such an important title that so many people hail as magnificent. Everyone's talking about a remake. I don't, was that like confirmed somewhere ever? I don't know why we're all so sure about that, but Genealogy kind of scares me, so I avoided that one for now. I thought about trying Engage again and giving it a second chance, but I went for something different. I played Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. No, not that one. Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. You know, the Famicom game. The first Fire Emblem ever. There was something so enticing to me about going back to this franchise's roots and trying to endure the most janky and archaic game that likely exists. And I mean, it's Marth. This is Marth's game. Marth Fire Emblem himself. I wanted to see his initial journey. I was lucky to grab the official translation that was released on Switch. Bafflingly, you can't get this anymore. They just took it off the shop. So if you want to play this yourself, you have to look elsewhere. I'm sure you'll find it if you look hard enough. But yeah, 8-bit Fire Emblem. Let's talk about that for a bit. What startled me the most was how intact the gameplay loop of Fire Emblem is. Here I am with a big group of blue units, moving them on a grid on a big plain of green grass, moving them over to a bunch of red units, and fighting them in a big pretty battle screen, and sometimes getting crits. I was just doing that on FE7. I think if you play any Fire Emblem and you go back to this one, it's not going to be as immediately jarring as you'd think it would be. There is a story in this game, and while not as much dialogue as a modern Fire Emblem would have, for an NES game, there is a shocking amount of dialogue. I mean, it mainly boils down to Marth, Sheeta, and a whole army of units banding together in a war with a neighboring kingdom. Dole? I don't know how to pronounce it, honestly. To be totally transparent, I'm still on my journey on Fire Emblem 1. I'm currently on chapter 11, about halfway, I think. But with Age of Imprisonment and Kirby Air Riders coming right around the corner, I wanted to get all of this Fire Emblem energy out of my system, just in case I'm not able to get back to it in a while. But I feel like I've still experienced a lot of the game and enough to just share my thoughts on the overall experience. Despite what I said about how familiar it is to players of Modern Fire Emblem, there are still some oddities. Healers are definitely one of the most notable. You don't gain experience by healing with your healers. Instead, the healers gain experience by taking damage. And they can't take a lot of that, and they can't heal themselves. So yeah, basically none of my healing characters have gained any levels, like maybe one. I hope that doesn't bite me in the butt. Another questionable choice that I made, because this is the NES, I didn't know how generous it was going to be. So when I saw a shop appear early, I overstocked myself on weapons. I was afraid of getting stuck in a position where if all the weapons I had broke over time, I just wouldn't have the inventory to replace them. But it turns out inventory management is really annoying. Trading items between characters who have free item slots and messing around with the convoy tent, it's all a big pain. And the characters are really, really not created equal. Fire Emblem understood that characters were going to die. In fact, it almost guaranteed that they would. So you would end up getting like Minerva, this super cool wyvern knight with good stats, can take hits, can deal damage, looks cool and is involved in the plot. And then you get like Bored and Cord. They're the same guy. They don't say anything, I think. And they're pretty much just there if you need a sacrificial lamb. For the most part, I have been managing. I was expecting this game to potentially be relentlessly difficult, but for the most part, I've been fine. Marth is really strong. Sheeta, I wish was stronger, but she can fly, and that's great. I like Hardin. I really like Merrick. And then there's Jagan. I learned what a Jagan is. Fire Emblem has always had like a unit that you get in the early game who is way stronger than the rest of your group, but doesn't grow at the same rate. So they're really strong in the early game, but they're not as strong as your other guys get naturally stronger. They're called Jagans because this guy is Jagan. It's really cool seeing the origin of these things. Jagan disappoints me constantly. I need him because he's really strong, but then he never performs the way I want him to. It's a constant tug of war of my patience. Speaking of, this game is pretty slow, particularly waiting for the game to calculate enemy movement. It didn't bother me for a couple chapters, but after a while, I started to take advantage of the game's built-in speed up function, and now I rarely turn that off. But yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised with Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. I was bracing myself for something that could be genuinely unplayable, particularly for someone like me that does not have a ton of Fire Emblem experience, yet I got a surprisingly competent game for its time, and aside from a few archaic quirks, is completely playable. Now, if the last 10 chapters of the game are completely brutal, then maybe I'll change my tone a little bit. But who knows? I'm still young. I'm still inexperienced. Perhaps if I'm being completely overwhelmed by units, it's just user error. And hey, if saying goodbye to a unit that I really like means that I can complete the chapter, maybe this is a band-aid that I just have to rip off. I know that Shadow Dragon has a remake on the DS, and I think I'm going to like it so much more now that I already have a familiarity with these characters. I bet a lot of them have changed dramatically, mainly because a lot of these characters don't have personalities. I've never loved how Shadow Dragon looks. Maybe that's just me. The art style has always kind of put me off from giving this particular game a chance. Yeah, so much so that I went to its Famicom counterpart instead, but I would definitely be interested in giving it a shot sometime, as well as its sequel, as I understand it, New Mystery of the Emblem, which was a sequel to this Famicom title, but also that Famicom sequel got a DS sequel similar to Shadow Dragon. Do I have all that right? I'm figuring it out. I'm learning. It has been fun getting to know a Nintendo franchise that I'm not as familiar with. At this point, I'm like 30. I've played most Marios. I've played a lot of Zeldas. Many of the main franchises that Nintendo offers, I can't have new experiences anymore unless new games come out. But Fire Emblem feels like I discovered a book in my favorite library. I've read all the books in this place top to bottom, but this one, fell behind the shelf, so I didn't see it until way later. And now I'm flipping through it and realizing that I get to have that experience that is so warm to me again. That being deep diving into a franchise and getting to know all of its ins and outs. This has been a really notable part of my gaming year of 2025, and I really wanted to share my journey so far with all of you. Maybe this will reach the eyes of some very wise sages of the Fire Emblem community. They can give me some good tips to know. That's all I have to say for now. I will certainly be picking up Fortune's Weave once it comes out next year. You can definitely expect me to make some kind of video on that. And I'll close off by saying that if you are unfamiliar with Fire Emblem as a whole, but you are a large Nintendo fan, you've never tried one before, but you see the fan reactions, you've seen all of the roster slots in Smash, and you've never quite gotten it, I recommend dipping your toes into it. I think it offers so much more than it may seem on the surface. And I think if certain elements of the modern Fire Emblem games don't appeal to you, mainly the Persona-esque dating sim style parts of the games, you don't really get that at all in the games I mentioned today, and I'm sure others around the same era. So these might be more your cup of tea. But okay, for real this time, that is all from me. I gotta get back to playing Age of Imprisonment on my new Nintendo Switch 2. See you all in the next video.